The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Summer music festivals are back. So to celebrate all this July, the Agenda in the Summer revisits conversations with a diverse cast of musicians and music experts. Tonight, Bruce Cockburn from earlier this year. Five decades of making music and writing songs that find new fans in successive generations is a rare feat. Bruce Cockburn's voice has been amongst the most forceful and distinctive in Canadian folk, pop, and spiritual music. His works are a roadmap to some of the pressing issues of the past half-century, from war and injustice to environmentalism. And after 13 Junos and countless other awards, he's just issued a greatest hits collection and set out on tour once more. Joining us now from San Francisco, California, Bruce Cockburn. Welcome back.
Thanks. Great to be back with you.
I'm so happy to meet you, even though it's virtually. You're about 2/3 of the way through a massive Canada-US tour, and you're about to kick off a tour in the province of Ontario. You've been in this business for 5 decades and have done many tours against many backdrops. What's it been like to tour during a time like this?
It's been interesting because, I mean, like everybody else, I had to wait 2 years to get this done. And I mean, this tour was supposed to happen in 2020, which was the actual 50th anniversary of the release of my first album. Mm-hmm. And we had a lot of shows planned, a more extensive tour than this one actually planned for that year. But obviously it didn't happen. So here we are. And what I'm finding in this, with the shows that I've done so far, is that people are very excited to be out. And it sort of almost doesn't matter who's on stage or what they're doing. It's just like, look at us all together in a room at once, you know, without freaking out. It's like, you know, it feels like we're all getting away with something.
And I think maybe it's reminding us of the things that we've taken for granted before, right?
I would say, yeah. I mean, I think the whole 2 years was time to sort of meditate on that notion. Because every time you turn around, there was something else that wasn't quite happening the way you were used to. So, you know, here we are now in a kind of a modified reality, you know, that I think is going to continue to modify itself over the next period of time. And so, you know, we will continue to be asked to be.
I imagine too that, you know, during that time, we've heard lots of stories of people learning how to bake during the past 2 years, learning a new language. But I imagine that in the past 2 years, you've been writing and making and composing new music. How did the pandemic inspire the new music you're composing now?
I have about almost enough songs to do a new album. We're thinking about recording in the fall. So yes, the songwriting has carried on. It's not at any more accelerated a pace than it would have during any other 2-year period, I don't think, but it's there, it's happening. And there are a couple of the songs that are directly a result of what we've been living with. One of the things, not just COVID, but the living in the U.S. as I am, we're confronted daily with this incredible level of fractiousness on the part of the population. And it's like things that used to be just descriptions or ways of identifying yourself have now become pejorative. Like words like liberal. You know, liberal now means in some circles that you're a supporter of pedophiles or something. You know, I mean, it's not literally, of course, but this is a rhetoric that's going around, and that isn't just a result of COVID, although I think it was exaggerated by the shutdown and all the different tensions that have been kind of fostered by people feeling that they were confronted with something threatening and the sense of being confined. I think those elements have conspired to aggravate something that the Trump administration also kind of deliberately aggravated. That was already there. It's not new, but the what used to be things that we tended to want to overlook or sidestep in order to get along with each other have now become reasons to hate each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a real bad thing. And I don't know where that's going to go. I don't think it's going to blow over quickly, but hopefully we can get past it.
Yeah, there's been this feeling of, I even have friends that I've known for a very long time that live in the States, and there just seems to be, it seems as if people are quick to misunderstand each other. And you mentioned the word liberal. You're a Christian. Nowadays, too, if you say you're a Christian, it seems to kind of imply other things. How have you received that?
That's not new either, really. I mean, there was a period, I remember talking with T-Bone Burnett, who produced a couple of albums for me in the early 90s about this. He is also, at least was then, a Christian. I don't know what his status is now, but I assume so. But he said, it might be time for Christians to just stop calling themselves Christians, because we were all tired of having to explain that we're Christian, but we're not one of those. And we're back to that again. I mean, for a while it was not an issue, mm-hmm. and now it is again. So it's unfortunate that that people have to bring God into these very mundane and kind of petty things. I mean, the effects are not petty; the effects are profound and serious. But the attitudes and the feelings and all that sort of stuff that are feeding this are petty. And so I mean, I don't think abortion's mentioned in the Bible at all, for instance, right? It might be. I might have missed something in there somewhere in the Old Testament, but it seems to me that there's a more than ready willingness on the part of numerous biblical figures of all persuasions in the early parts of the Bible to sacrifice their firstborn, and it was the done thing back then. I mean, so it's and there's just so much confusion around all this stuff, and that confusion is manipulated by people with an interest in doing so, whether for political reasons or reasons of just personal power in the case of certain pastors and that kind of thing. But it's tainted, and it really has nothing. The idea that America is a Christian nation is completely counter to the American Constitution, for one thing, mm-hmm. which it talks about. The framers of the Constitution talked about God, but they were Masons. I mean, they weren't necessarily Christian, and the lengths they went to separate church and state were radical at the time and really worthwhile.
Well, speaking of radical, not to interrupt you, but speaking of radical, you've been called radical in your music. It's interesting because I find that a lot of your fans, I think we're all trying to find the meaning of life. And one of your songs, one of my favorite quotes, my favorite lyrics from you is from Lovers in a Dangerous Time. And you say, but nothing worth having comes without some kind of fight. Got to kick at the darkness till it bleeds daylight. And I think it's kind of speaks so much of what's going on. And you've also been vocal on several issues throughout your career, environmentalism in particular. We have a short clip from If a Tree Falls in the Forest, and then we'll continue our conversation. Sheldon, please roll.
Climate Control Center for the World. Ancient cord coexistence hacked by parasitic greedhead scam. From Sarawak to Amazonas, Costa Rica to mangy BC hills, Cortez rhythm of falling timber. What kind of currency grows in these new deserts, these brand new floodplains?
It feels kind of heartbreaking that, that song was released in 1988, 34 years ago. The planet wasn't experiencing the pace of of change that we are right now. You see what is happening around the world and the climate crisis, and you think what, Bruce?
It's depressing and worrisome. I mean, not for me. I'm going to be dead before the real stuff hits the fan. My daughter, my younger daughter, especially, and my grandchildren, are going to be living with a much worse situation than we're currently dealing with, and I hate that idea. And I don't know how avoidable it was. It's not avoidable now. I don't think. I think we missed the boat. I think we can probably still have the chance to mitigate it somewhat, but it's happening, and the thing is, yeah, 34 years ago when that song came out, it wasn't news then either. It was like, I mean, I got that from somewhere. I didn't go out and do the research myself and discover it. People were warning about this stuff back in the 60s and early 70s, and nobody did anything. That's not true. It's not true to say that nobody did anything, but the people who acted and the people who addressed the issue as best they could were not the people in a position to really make major changes, and therefore the changes have not happened.
There is so much going on in the world right now: the climate crisis, the pandemic, many wars, the Russian invasion in Ukraine. One of your most popular songs, "If I Had a Rocket Launcher," was inspired by a trip to a refugee camp. What impact did that experience have on you?
It was profoundly moving and a major kind of wake-up moment for me. We'd all seen refugee camps on TV, and we'd seen the ads, and there's Sally Field out there crying and telling you that you need to send money for these poor little kids. But we could understand that the need was there, but to be in the presence of people in that situation, where it comes off the screen and becomes fully fleshed, as it were, is a whole other thing. Because you can have people. It's not worthless to put this stuff on a screen, but it's not the same as with from every other social interaction we have. And it's different when you're talking to somebody face to face, and there's a smell about it. There are feelings that don't come through very well by technological means. And there's a sense. I mean, in the case of this particular experience, I was in two different camps inhabited by refugees from Guatemala. They had fled horrendous repression and persecution in Guatemala. Mm-hmm. Just vile, brutal stuff. And they had maintained, in very desperate straits, with no food and no prospects and all that, they had maintained a really great social cohesiveness and a sense of dignity that was unexpected. They were desperate, but you wouldn't know that from from the way they carried themselves.
Well, I lived in a refugee camp, and I think it's very different when people, because sometimes people hear that there's a little bit of like pity, but when you live in those camps, you're living your life as you know it with your family, and you're living life and you're experiencing life. I just wanted to quote a lyric from "If I Had a Rocket Launcher." The lyrics: how many kids they have murdered. If I had a rocket launcher, I'd make somebody pay. We're seeing the Russian invasion on Ukraine. And I think people are kind of feeling like this, this feeling of hopelessness, helplessness. How can we get past this need to wage wars and humans' capacity for self-destruction?
Well, it's a very large question, and one that people have wrestled with as long as we've been on the planet, I think, because the tendency to brutalize each other has been with us since we've been on the planet, and I don't think it's going away. I happen to have grown up in a part of the world and in an era when there was no war. I mean, we had wars everywhere else. Canadians and Americans both were involved in wars all over the place. But but on our own turf, no. And so, that's an aberration historically. I don't think there have been very many other periods in history where you can have a whole generation that can say that. But having traveled as I have and visited the conflict zones that I have, I came to feel that war is actually a default condition of humankind. I think that what the challenge that we face is to rein in a tendency that we will never get rid of, that may be a product of the fact that, as a fledgling species thousands of years ago, we were, or even 500,000 years ago, whatever, we experienced being both predator and prey. And so we act like both. If you watch horses, they act like prey animals. They're fearful of things in the way that they are, and they're blustery in the way they are, and so on. And we see that, parallel mammalian behavior in people too. But at the same time, we also have the predator side, that where we kill things for a living, basically. And so we've never really come to grips with that dichotomy there. So until we do, we're going to be swept in one direction or the other, depending on whether we're angry or afraid, or whether it's fight or flight, and so on. And I mean, we complicate things because we are the most complicated mammals that we know of, and so.
Well, your music has played a. Because looking back, and music has a history of having an impact on world issues. And your music, they've been called protest songs. What impact do you think your music has had on your fans' activism? Maybe a way to counter all this rage and uncertainty we have around the world.
Well, the hope is by offering something that by paying attention to these things and kind of looking them in the eye and addressing them, that we can actually do something about it and refrain from the excesses of that kind of activity. So with songs, I mean, I don't think songs really change anything, but what they do is if there's a body of popular sentiment out there, the songs can resonate with that and become a kind of rallying point, perhaps, for the feelings that are out there. So in my own case, the stuff I wrote about Central America did have an effect on people. I hear it all the time from people who said, "Oh yeah, your songs inspired me to go to Nicaragua and pick coffee, or to get involved in solidarity work, or whatever." And I didn't expect that when I put the songs out. I just wanted to communicate what I thought was true with my peers, basically. But it had that effect on people. And other songs I hear about that have had more of the feedback has been personal that I've heard, but and not so much around political issues. But the capacity's out there. I mean, there are songs. "We Shall Overcome" became an anthem of the civil rights movement in the 60s because people could sing it, because it's a powerful song to begin with, and it touched how people felt and wanted to feel. So if a song does that, then it might have a place in the process. I mean, there's another whole thing though. Sadly, all these years later, we're still dealing with friggin' civil rights. Like, who would have guessed? 50 years later, 60, 70 years later. I mean, it's like, I'm perplexed by that.
I'm also perplexed, and I think there's so many things that are, as I mentioned, so many things are happening around the world and people trying to make sense of them. You're a devout Christian, and you recently returned to church after not going to church for about 40 years, I think. You've said, and you've also said that in the past that your songs come from God. What did it feel like for you to go back to a physical church?
I wonder if I can remember now. I haven't done it. No, it's been a couple of years.
Well, before the pandemic, right? Yeah.
Church became virtual, and that's what I've been doing. But but really for me, it was a what, I'm just trying to think of the best way to say this. That at various points in my life, there have been indicators that, okay, a page is turning. It's time for this new thing to happen. So I drifted away from going to church long ago because partly because of circumstances changing in my exterior life, and partly because it was part of a journey to become more deeply involved with people socially and less cerebral about things, and this all, it worked out that way. So all these years later, my wife started. She got herself involved in a very deep exploration of spiritual things because of the death of a friend of ours, tragic death that happened a few years ago, and in the process, started going to this particular church, and she was saying, "Oh, it's really great. You got to come. You're going to really like it." And I'm going, I'm not a church going anymore. I don't think so. And I resisted for a long time until I finally went, caved, and I walked through the door to this place. It's a little church, small congregation, but there was this wall of love. Mm. The minute I walked in the door, it was like a palpable thing, and okay, good. And the music was good, and the pastor spoke very well, and was very well informed and erudite in his talk, and so I thought, well, I gotta pay attention to this, and I started going, and I very quickly realized that page had turned. It was time for me to be back among people who identify as Christians again.
When I used to go to church, I was in the church choir, although my voice is best kept in closed doors, behind closed doors, my closed doors. Do you sing in the choir? Do you participate in the choir?
I played in the band.
Yeah.
This is it's a non-denominational church, but it's got kind of Pentecostal leanings here and there, and so it's the kind of church that doesn't have a choir; it has a band, and I ended up. They didn't know who I was. I was just this old guy walked in, with an attractive younger woman, and okay, we'll put up with you. And they were all very friendly and everything and welcome, but nobody knew anything about me. And it turned out I played guitar. Oh, great! Well, the band needs a guitar player. If you want to come and sit in, so I came and sat in, and it became a regular thing.
That's amazing.
And it was fun for me because I got to play electric guitar and I got to play somebody else's music, and I enjoyed it a lot, actually, and I missed that part of it over these last 2 virtual years.
We only have a few minutes left, and I wanted to get at least one more question in. You wrote and performed the theme song for the kids' animated TV series Franklin, who's a turtle, very popular in my house. We have a clip to show. Sheldon, please roll.
Hey, it's Franklin, coming over to play, growing a little every day. Here he comes with all his friends. They've got stories, got time to spend with you.
Obviously, that song is a song that appeals to children and draws children in. When you're a child, you're still learning, and you have a young daughter as well. Looking back on a career that spans 5 decades and nearly 40 albums, what would you tell your younger self?
Don't worry so much. That'd be the main message. I used to worry about a lot of stuff I didn't really have to worry about. But doing things like the Franklin theme were ways of countering that in a way. I mean, I wasn't, that was long after I'd started. I mean, that was in the 90s, I worried about public perception of me and how it would affect me as a person. in ways that I probably didn't have to worry about, because it was all my imagination was like, what if this happens, what if that happens? Over the years, you've learned to kind of let the what ifs slide because you don't have that kind of control anyway.
And I think a lot of us need to hear that, not to worry so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you. I wish we had more time. Best of luck on the tour and all the best in anything that you're doing. We love you here on the show and are really grateful that you had some time for us tonight. Thank you so much, Bruce.
Thanks for having me. It's been great to talk with you.
And that is tonight's Agenda in the Summer. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. Thanks for watching TVO and for joining us online at tvo.org. And we'll see you again next time.
The Agenda in the Summer with Nam Kiwanuka is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Any change is hard because you don't know what it will bring ultimately.
Can a town lose its identity over time?
The last mine probably operated, I'd say, 40 years ago.
Well, and even when Tim Hortons came in, like, you'd think it was the apocalypse.
Buxton would be a stop on the Underground Railroad.
We want to be able to preserve this history.
Visit 3 more unique Ontario towns and discover how their residents deal with change.
Too many Black folk don't know where they came from.
There is a very special desire to keep that heritage alive.
This place is seeing a boom. Even if you're a newcomer to this region, they still treat you as if you've been here your whole life.
Some of the longer time residents are worried, if we remove all of our older buildings, what have we got left?
Because if nothing happened with those small towns, no growth, you disappear.
I don't see it petering out now.
Crossroads, Beyond Boom and Bust, a TVO original, continues tonight at 9.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to Saturday Night at the Movies. My name is Owen.
People would say, Saturday night, do you